Red Mafia. They were gathered inside a library sitting room with panoramic views of the deserted beach and the Atlantic. They pretended to be his dearest, closest friends as he entered the room, shaking his hand, patting his broad back and shoulders, muttering easy lies about how good it was to see him. The very few who know what I look like, the inner circle, the ones I trust more than anyone else. Lunch had been served before he arrived, and then the entire household staff had been removed from the house. He had parked in back, then come in through the kitchen. No one had seen him except the men in this room, 9 of them. He stood before them and lit up a cigar. To victory. They have asked for an extension of the deadline. Can you believe it? The wolf said between satisfying puffs. The Russian men around the table began to laugh. They shared the wolf's disdain for the current governments and leaders around the world. Politicians were weak by nature, and the few strong ones who snuck into office somehow were soon weakened by the process of government. It had always been that way. "Drop the hammer," one of the men shouted. The wolf smiled. "You know, I should. But they have a point. If we act now, we lose too. Let me get them on the line. They're expecting an answer. This is interesting, no? We negotiate with the United States, Britain, and Germany, as if we were a world power." The wolf raised his index finger as the call went through. "They're expecting to hear from me." "You're all on the line?" He spoke into the phone. They were. "No small talk. The time for that has passed. Here is my decision. You have another 2 days, till 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. But the price has just doubled." He disconnected. Then he looked around at his people. "What? You approve, or what? Do you know how much money I just made for you?" They all began to clap, then cheer. The wolf stayed with them for the remainder of the afternoon. He endured their false compliments, their requests thinly disguised as suggestions. But then he had other business in New York City, so he left them to enjoy the house by the sea and whatever. "The ladies will arrive soon," he promised. "Models and beauty queens from New York. They say the most beautiful pussy in the world. Have fun. On my money, my sweat, my brilliance," he thought. He was back in the Lotus then, heading toward the Long Island Expressway. He was squeezing the black rubber ball, but finally he set it down. He took out his cell phone again, pressed a few numbers. A code was transmitted. A circuit closed. A primer fired. Even from that far away, he heard the beach house explode. He didn't need them anymore. He didn't need anyone. Zamoshit. The bombs had broken every bone in all of their worthless, useless bodies. Payback. Revenge. It was a beautiful thing.
Chapter 61. We received word in London that the deadline had been extended 48 hours, and the relief, though temporary, was still extraordinary for all of us. Within the hour, we got word of a bombing on Long Island. Several Red Mafia bosses reported dead. What did it mean? Had the wolf struck again? At his own people? There was nothing useful for me to do after the long round of meetings at Scotland Yard. About 10 at night, I met with a friend from Interpol at a London restaurant, the Cinnamon Club, which was on the site of what had once been the old Westminster Library on Great Smith Street. I was past being exhausted, and in fact I had gotten my second wind. Besides, I always looked forward to spending time with Sandy Greenberg, who was probably the smartest police officer I had ever worked with. Maybe she had a new idea about the wolf, Or the weasel. At any rate, no one knew the European underworld better than she did. Sandy is Sandra to all but her closest friends, and I am fortunate enough to be one of them. She's tall, attractive, chic, a little gawky, witty, and very funny. She gave me a big hug and kisses on both cheeks. "Is this the only way I get to see you, Alex? Some kind of terrifying international emergency? Where's the love?" "You could always come to Washington to see me," I said, as we pulled apart. "You look absolutely great, by the way." "I do, don't I?" said Sandy. "Come, we have a table in the back. I've missed you terribly. God, it's good to see you. You look wonderful yourself, even with all this going on. How do you do it?" The dinner was a fusion of Indian and European that couldn't be found in the States, at least not anywhere around Washington. Sandy and I talked for well over an hour about the case, but over coffee we lightened up and let things get a little more personal. I noticed a gold signet ring and a Trinity band she wore on her pinky finger. "Beautiful," I told her. "From Catherine," she said, and smiled. Sandy and Catherine Grant had been living together for about 10 years and were one of the happiest couples I had ever met. Lessons to be learned. But who can ever figure it all out? Not me. I couldn't even master my own life. "I see you're still not married," she said. "You noticed?" Sandy smirked. "Detective, you know. Investigator par excellence. So tell me everything, Alex." "Not a lot to tell," I said, and found my choice of words interesting. "I'm seeing someone I like a lot." Sandy interrupted. "Oh, hell, you like everyone a lot. That's the way you are, Alex. You even liked Kyle Craig. Found some good in the creepy, psychopathic bastard." "You could be right, generally speaking. But I'm over Kyle, and I don't like anything about Colonel Jeffrey Schaefer, or the Russian who calls himself the Wolf." "I am right, dear boy. So, who is this incredible woman you like a lot and whose heart you'll break or she'll break yours? One or the other, I'm certain of it already. Why do you keep torturing yourself?" I grinned. Couldn't help it. "Another detective. Well, actually, her title is Inspector. She lives in San Francisco." "How convenient. That's brilliant, Alex. What is it, 2,000 miles from Washington? So you have a date, what, every other month?" I laughed again. "I see your tongue is as sharp as ever. Practice, practice. So you still haven't found the right woman. Pity. A real shame. I have a couple of friends. Well, hell, let's not even go there. Let me ask you a personal question, though. Do you think you're truly over Maria?" The thing about Sandy, as an investigator, is that she has thoughts that others don't. She explores areas that are often ignored. My wife, Maria, had been murdered over 10 years ago in a drive-by shooting. I'd never been able to solve it, and maybe I wasn't over Maria. Maybe, just maybe, I couldn't find closure until I solved her murder. The case was still open. That thought had been tugging at me for years and still caused some pain whenever it entered my head. "I am totally smitten with Jamila Hughes," I said. "That's all I know for now. We enjoy each other. Why is that a bad thing?" Sandy smiled. "I heard you the first time, Alex. You like her a lot. But you haven't told me that you're madly in love, and you're not the kind of person who settles for smitten, right?" "Of course I'm right. I'm always right." "I love you," I said. Sandy laughed. "Well then, it's settled. You're staying at my place tonight." "All right, fine," I agreed. We both laughed, but half an hour later Sandy dropped me off at my hotel off Victoria Street. "You think of anything?" I said as I climbed out of the taxi. "I'm on it," said Sandy. And I knew she was as good as her word, and I needed all the help I could possibly get in Europe. Chapter 62.
Henry Seymour lived not too far from the Weasel's hideout on Edgware Road, in the area between Marble Arch and Paddington that is sometimes known as Little Lebanon. Colonel Schaefer walked to the former SAS member's flat that morning, and as he trudged along, he wondered what had happened to this city, his city, and to his bloody country as well. What a dismal scene. The streets were filled with Middle Eastern coffee shops and restaurants and grocers. The aromas of ethnic cuisines were thick in the air that morning by 8. Tabbouleh, lentil soup, Bastia. In front of a paper store, 2 elderly men smoked tobacco through a water-filtered hookah. Bloody hell! What the fuck has happened to my country? Henry Seymour's apartment was located above a men's clothing shop, and the Weasel went straight away to the 3rd floor. He knocked once, and Seymour opened up for him. As soon as he saw Henry, though, Schaefer was concerned. The man had lost 30 or 40 pounds since he'd seen him last, and that was only a few months ago. His full head of curly black hair was almost gone, replaced by a few scraggly tufts of grey and white frizz. Indeed, it was a struggle for Schaefer to connect this man with his former army mate, one of the best demolition experts he'd ever seen. The two had fought side by side in Desert Storm, and then again as mercenaries in Sierra Leone. In Desert Storm, Schaefer and Seymour had been part of the 22nd SAS Regiment Mobility Troop. Mobility's primary mission was to go behind enemy lines and cause havoc. Nobody was better at it than Schaefer and Henry. Poor Henry didn't look capable of causing too much havoc now, but looks could be deceiving. Hopefully, anyway. "So, are you ready for a job? An important mission?" Schaefer asked. Henry Seymour smiled, and he was missing a couple of front teeth. "Suicide, I hope," he said. "As a matter of fact," said the Weasel, "that's a rather nice idea." He sat down across from Henry and gave him his piece, and his old friend actually applauded once he'd heard the plan. "I've always wanted to blow up London," he said. "I'm just the man for the job." "I know," said the Weasel.
Chapter 63. Dr. Stanley S. Bergen of Scotland Yard addressed several hundred of us in a conference room that was filled to the rafters with police and other government officials. Dr. Bergen was a little over 5 feet and had to be close to 200 pounds and at least 60 years of age, but he was still a commanding presence. He spoke without notes, and not once during his talk did any of us look away. We were definitely operating on borrowed time, and everyone in the room knew it all too well. "We are at a critical point where we have to implement our contingency plans for London," Dr. Bergen said. "Responsibility is under the London Resilience Forum. I have every confidence in them. You should too. All right, this is how we will respond in London. If we have any warning that a disaster is coming, it will be required that all broadcasters turn over their airtime to us. Text messaging alerts to mobile phones and pagers will also be available. Other less effective methods include loudhailers, mobile public address, etc. Suffice it to say that the people will know if we know ahead of time that an attack is coming. The Met's police commissioner or the Home Secretary will go on TV with the message. If there is a bomb or a chemical attack, the police and fire services will set up immediately in the area. Once it is clear exactly what has happened, the affected area will be isolated as best we can. The fire brigade and police will then define 3 zones at the scene: hot, warm, and cold. Those in the hot zone, if they are alive, will be kept there until they are decontaminated, if that is possible. Fire and ambulance services will be set up in the warm zone. So will decontamination shower units. The cold zone will be used for investigation, command and control vehicles, and also for loading ambulances. Dr. Bergen stopped talking and looked out at us. His face was set in a worried look, but also revealed the compassion he was feeling for his city and its people. Some of you may have noticed that I have not actually made mention of the word evacuation.